Len, welcome to Just Curious.
Thanks, Stu. Appreciate you having us on.
You have decades of enterprise IT and cloud experience. What led you to start Helios Core and why now?
Yeah, it's been a long time in the managed services and managed application world for me, and the inflection point was kind of twofold. One, from a personal perspective, being in a large corporation and some of the inflexible and slow-moving elements of a company like that, as well as the more inward focus versus outward entrepreneurial focus, had kind of gotten to a point where I really needed a change personally. And then when looking at what to do in today's climate and market, AI was clearly a hot topic. But our approach was a little bit different in starting a platform focused AI managed services business, so coupling platform and managed services together to really help businesses solve their problems. And I think that's a little bit unique still in what we're seeing in the market today.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Helios Core? You mentioned platform plus managed services. Tell us a little bit more about what Helios Core does, where it's focused with respect to AI, who it's focused on serving, and then also what kind of value is enabled through marrying the platform and managed services.
Yeah, so we're not focused on any particular industry, but kind of broadly across solving business problems for our customers, right? That could be customer service, that could be sales, that could be internal business processes, HR and finance. Small business up to maybe the small enterprise type size of company. I think the big thing that we're seeing is there's this there's everybody wants to do it, but there's a confusion as to where to start, right? So one of the offerings that we have, and one of the things we're helping a lot of companies identify within their business is just where they can apply AI, what makes sense to use as a use case. So there's definitely a training and enablement element as well as use case development to help them understand where AI could be applied. And then we bring the platform and services to bear on that particular problem. So one of the unique things about the Helios Core platform that we've built is, it's kind of a springboard to bring agentic AI into a business, and it allows for companies to leverage that platform to do agents that take calls or take emails or make tool calls into their backend systems and things like that.
Why should small and middle market companies care about AI?
I think it's hugely important. I mean, maybe it's just I've been in the AI world for the last 12 months and I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but I think it's going to change the way that everything operates. And if you're not taking advantage or starting to take advantage in your business today, then someone else is going to bypass you. So I think it's hugely important for small businesses or businesses of any size to really start doing something in AI now, even if it's small, even if it's just taking personal tasks and seeing what they can do to really use it as a force multiplier. But I really think the value and where they're going to be able to accelerate growth is in this agentic AI space, is where, you can take processes, take an agent, and apply knowledge from your business and let it make decisions and take action. That's where you can free yourself up to do more value added tasks. And especially in small businesses, there's so many hats that people are wearing.
Yeah.
If you have to do everything, right, and you have a small team that's supporting your business, right, that's all the more reason to go and try to apply this new technology to how you operate your business.
We're going to walk through an example of what that looks like, but maybe we could start at the beginning by defining a core concept. What is an AI agent in your words, and how does it fit into the world of traditional AI, generative AI, and now agentic AI?
Yeah, so I guess we can start at the tail of that and walk back to agentic AI. I mean, generative AI is really what kind of the chat GTP moment and this creative AI that's out there now that really has caused a lot of the groundswell, right? So those are prompted, right? You interact with them, you can have them do things for you, but then it's done, right? They don't do anything past that. Traditional AI or machine learning, that was a lot more data science driven, right? I'm going to give you a whole bunch of data that's going to be very well maintained and cleansed, and then have you look at it through different angles. The generative AI and now agentic AI, still needs data. Data is key, but it's maybe a little bit less, or a little bit more forgiving, right? It's a little bit less about the data science and having these massive data projects, and then being able to give enough data that it makes sense for the process to work, but not having to go down that road so far. So the agentic piece of it is really taking the large language models and the generative AI that kind of kicked this all off, and giving it what I would say is two major qualities, right? One of them, obviously, you need to give it business data. So it needs to have some knowledge. It needs to have some knowledge of your business process and what you're looking for it to achieve. So it has to have that persona, that framework, right? A large language model and the back end frontier models is critical to the agents doing their work, but it's got to know about your business. So it's got to have that. It's then going to make some level of decision based off of the inputs that it receives and the knowledge of your business. So that decision-making capability is critical to the agentic nature of it. And the last thing is really the tool calling. It's got to be able to take some action. It's not going to be as valuable if it just takes the information about your business, uses a large language model and all the knowledge that it has of the world, and then makes a decision and then sits on it, right? Then it's going to hand it back to you, and you're going to have to do something with it. So that tool calling, that ability to act, is really what makes it agentic. So then it can scale. It can do things in your business with some level of autonomy. Obviously, we always want to have a human in the loop. We want to have some accountability and ability to track what the agents are doing and the decisions they're making, the actions they're taking. But that's where the real value is in the agentic AI, is it's going to work 24/7, 365 at scale on your behalf. And that's where the true value of the agentic AI comes in.
Yeah. What kind of tasks, and I think you spoke to a few earlier, what kind of tasks can agents actually do today? And what kind of information do they need in order to work reliably in a business setting?
So one of the ones that we're focused on is kind of a customer service engagement, right? So I think that's a good use case for agentic AI. So having a conversation either via chat or voice, if it's a calling scenario, having that conversation and then doing something from a customer service perspective. Maybe that's taking orders, maybe that's answering questions, but then the action is it's gonna then put that order in, or it's going to think of it in the context of a service desk, right? It's going to have the conversation, then it's going to reset the password, or it's going to mail you the standard operating procedure for you to go execute something on your laptop, or whatever the case may be. So I think the customer service use case is a great one, and it's fairly broad, right? Across all businesses, you could imagine how it could work in yours. I think the outbound engagement is also another interesting use case, where you could craft very personalized messages to either your customers, thanking them, your prospective customers, or even do some prospecting with agentic AI and give that personalization to it. So I think there's lots of potential with it.
Yeah, there's a lot of activity in agentic AI. What's different about the Helios Core platform you're building?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're differentiating ourselves with is this idea of the platform delivered managed services, right? So a lot of, call it point and click, tool-based agentic platforms are out there, is really a software as a service that you would go and buy a seat and then, try to create your own agents. And those are going to be good for maybe offloading some of your individual personal tasks, but they're not going to run business process at scale. So that's what we want to do with our platform and services together. So we're not selling the platform to the community. We're trying to bring it as an enabler to get those business outcomes achieved. And we're also then going to continue to engage in a managed service so that you're not left holding the bag, so to speak, right? Especially, small businesses have a ton of hats to wear, like I talked about before. And, being able to rely on a partner that's going to make sure that the deployment that you've got is doing what you want it to do. It's going to course correct if there's something that's an issue. It's going to allow you to give us feedback and maybe add additional features into the system as it grows with your business. So I think that's a big differentiator. I think, it's a lot to ask a small business to go out and learn this technology. It's changing very quickly. There's tons of different new products coming into the market, and what's going to be right for their business is difficult to kind of go choose. So the point and click kind of SaaS offerings, I think, can help individuals offload tasks for sure. and do that in an autonomous agentic way, which is great. But they're not really going to take on business functions and accomplish business goals in the same way that we think we can with our platform and services.
Yeah. Let's walk through an example of that. You mentioned to me earlier work that you've been doing with a rental services company. I'd love to share that story. What problem they came to you with, and then how you went about building them an agentic solution. So who came to you, and what was the problem?
Yeah, so it's a local rental business. They rent heavy equipment, skid steers, excavators, floor sanders, to a mix of construction companies that are doing things as well as the general public. So as you might imagine, they get tons of inquiries, right? Inquiries around availability, inquiries around pricing, what they do and don't rent. So a lot of those calls are coming in and distracting from the rest of the business, right? Running the operations, dispatching equipment, dealing with problems, fixing and maintaining equipment. And they run a relatively small staff. So the owner of the business has to field a lot of those calls. And his challenge was twofold. One, he struggled to give the same level of customer service and the ability to try to solve customers' problems and get them the information in a very customer-centric way by just taking someone off of their post and having them answer the phones. So he always saw a degrading quality if he wasn't the one doing the job. And he then had all of the other things he needs to do in the business suffer because he's always taking all the phone calls, right? So his goal was quite clearly just to reduce the number of things he had to answer every day. If it was a price quote or if it was just an answer, do you have this, if it's available. That was his main goal. Therefore, he could free up his time to deal more intimately with customers who had problems, to help his staff from managing the fleet of equipment and the rest of the business. So that was the problem we set out to solve. What we built was based off of our framework. We trained an agent to know all of his pricing and all of his pricing policies, right? So he's got some unique ways he prices and very customer friendly way to extend a rental and things like that, as well as delivery policies, how far, how much, etc. So we had to train our agent on all of those different elements of his business, and then it would take phone calls for him, right? So that's what it was deployed to do. It's mainly going to give pricing and take bookings. But he sees the opportunity to expand that to potentially, dispatching for dropping off equipment, picking up equipment in the future, and additional benefits.
Yeah. How do you train an agent like that? So what sorts of information does it have to ingest to be able to simulate, to replicate the experience of talking to the owner of a business who presumably has been doing this for a long time and is an expert really in his business? How do you train that agent? What sort of things do you feed it to give it confidence and information to respond to questions?
So probably one of the biggest challenges was exactly that, right? So we could get it 70% of the way there just from data that he had, right? He had data on his website. He had, his pricing policy was clear. He had the price per, piece of equipment per duration of rental. So we could get a lot of that to ingest it into answering questions just based off of that data. And it would give that coupled with the knowledge that's in a large language model, right? And of course, we had to give it guardrails so it wasn't making things up or finding something on the internet and just answering the question with something that wasn't true and hallucinating. So we had to narrow it down based off of the data that we had about his business as well as just what the LLM can infer from knowledge. But that only got it maybe 70% of the way there. The other 30% was the real difficult piece, and that'll be iterative. But that was extracting all of the 20 plus years of knowledge, right? And things he would just intrinsically know and say on a call because he is who he is and what he's done for so long. And the agent would have no way of knowing that because it's not written down and it's just his way of working. So that was the biggest challenge because, he's a busy guy and having him call and test during testing and training to give us feedback is something he had to free up his time to do. And then the way to get that information out, it's not like it was a document he just didn't give us, right? It was knowledge and it was in his head. So we actually came up with a creative solution for that, whereas during training, he could call and have a conversation like he was a customer. But if the agent ever went and did something he didn't want it to, and it answered a question the way he didn't want it to, and we actually built in kind of like a keyword he could say, which would take the agent out of I'm a rental agent solving your problems into I'm just listening now to how you want me to behave. And that would give him the ability to dictate to it what exactly he would say, right? So no, this is how I would handle the solution or the situation in that scenario. And then we would get that notes, and our development team could incorporate that back into the behavior. Maybe that was changing the prompt, right? Maybe it was, we were getting pricing wrong, or it had read into something from the data, and that happened a few times. Like, he doesn't rent painting equipment, doesn't rent paint sprayers or any of those things, but one of the descriptions of a different piece of equipment, I think it was a pressure washer, had something that confused the agent, right? So he started asking questions and, kind of broke in and said, wait a minute, I don't rent this stuff. How are you getting that? So we had to figure out from what the model was responding with from our RAG database as to what it was getting and why it thought that it rented something it didn't. And that allowed us to kind of correct the behavior and get back on track. So that was a bit of an innovative thing that we built into the process for him in order to make it easy for him to help us train.
How does this integrate into his existing business and stack?
Yeah, so a little bit of challenges around that just because the software that he was on from call it a back-end product doesn't expose a lot. So we originally just gave him a very clean way to then take the rental information that the customer wanted and input it. That was the first kind of phase. The second phase is to integrate with QuickBooks for him because that's what he uses in the background, and they've got a more robust API. So we're going to leverage that for a lot of the things that we can then pull from an inventory perspective and data and customer information. So that's where we're pulling customer information and updating customer information. We're leveraging QuickBooks from that perspective because his other tool didn't have it, and he already has a synchronization between those two.
Yeah. Was there any skepticism on his part about the potential for AI and agents to kind of replicate him before you began? And like, how does he feel about it now?
Yeah, there's definitely some skepticism because he's a very vibrant individual, right? He's outgoing, he's very engaging, right? So he wanted to really have a digital twin of himself. And we didn't set out to digitize his personality, right? And what we wanted to do was create something that could offload the work and do it in a very professional way and not sound, like a robot to its end customers. So the voice that we chose, right, from an engagement perspective was part of that. The speed with which it talks and some of the ways it engages is in some of that. So he was a bit skeptical at first, partly because, he is who he is from a personality perspective. But also we had to temper that a little bit and say, like, that we're not trying to recreate you from a personality perspective. We're trying to recreate what you're doing in your business. So we set expectations a little bit from that perspective. And then once we got the first kind of MVP up and he could have a bit of a conversation, just ask questions about equipment, he was actually pleasantly surprised because it's just knowledgeable about what he has and what it could be used for and whatnot. And then we had to iterate and fine tune on the various permutations and combinations of equipment, right? To make it feel more like he would naturally engage. But once we got it to that level, I think, it got him to a point where he was confident it could at least engage and take a good portion of calls and answer a lot of questions that people had. Of course, we still need to give the customers a way that they can escalate. He can talk to them individually and answer questions if the agent can't get it. And we anticipate that also improving over time, right? Give it a year worth of training and back and forth, and it'll be better than it is on launch.
Yeah. And my understanding, this is recently deployed, so not all the numbers are in, but previously he was spending all his time doing customer service related calls. What does the kind of after state look like in terms of what his week is like now?
Yeah, you're right. We're early days. It's kind of a phased rollout, so it's not being asked to take 100% of his workload in the beginning here. So before brand deployment, he was on the phone all the time. Probably 70% of his day was on the phone, either answering questions or taking new bookings or dealing with an issue of a rental. So the out of the gate numbers we're anticipating tracking that towards 50% of his calls, which mainly is going to be the bookings and pricing inquiries and do you rent this equipment or that equipment. We fully anticipate that he's still going to handle customer issues where they've had a problem, the machine can't start, they had an accident, right? Those types of scenarios, we fully anticipate him still engaging, and that's where he's going to spend his time on the phone. But those low-hanging fruit from a customer inquiry or booking, we anticipate taking those calls. So probably about half of his total calls.
Yeah. And 70% of his time was on call. So you're talking about potentially freeing up 35% of his time.
Yep.
And tell me a little bit about the role of the managed service part of the business here. What are you doing with him on an ongoing basis to ensure this works and scales and delivers that value?
Yeah. So as part of the ongoing service, so first of all, we give him visibility into what's going on. So we have a portal that has access into view all of the calls. It analyzes sentiment of the call. So he can flag up if there was a call that was a negative sentiment. He can follow up with the customer if need be, or he can listen to the call or read the transcript and then give us feedback and say, hey, this is behavior we need to correct. So the service is really to provide him the visibility into what's going on and then work with him to correct anything where the behavior isn't what he wants. So then he gets the product that he wants long term, right? In addition to that kind of visibility and ability to see what the agent's doing, that human oversight, we also have some effort for him to tune it. So for example, dispatching is something he thinks it might do in the future. Well, if that dispatch is as simple as saying, hey, this order is in and we can read his back end financial system and it's due out tomorrow, right? At the end of the day, the agent could go through all of the things that are due to be delivered tomorrow, and it could go and make a phone call or a text message to the drivers to go and say, hey, here's your schedule for the day. So building those additional functionalities in over time is another element of the managed service too. So it's going to continue to grow and add value to his business.
And this was a voice agent. Tell me a little bit more about voice agents and why is voice such an important domain for AI right now?
Yeah, I think voice is one of the things that we think we've built a really good product around, and we're a little bit surprised to see how quickly that part of the industry's taken off. There's tons of new development coming out from frontier models and other companies that are focused on making voice better. And that's great because we can take advantage of that, right? Our platform is going to be able to take advantage of new technology under the hood to make it better in the future. So that's fantastic for us. We welcome that. So I think the advancements that are coming in the voice space and the ability to expand that into other areas, like I mentioned marketing earlier, right? Outbound marketing could be an area you could expand voice into. So we're excited about all that that's going on. I think the other thing that's interesting from a voice perspective is, the way that people work is going to change. I think it already is, right? You see large investments in different modes of technology like glasses, right? Instead of sitting at a computer and typing and moving a mouse like we've done for decades, right? Mobile and dictation of things to your phone and having glasses that could recognize the environment and then interact with you through voice and having that backed up by a large language model and a voice agent, all of those things coming together, I think is where the future voice is going. I think that's kind of exciting.
Yeah. This example is for a rental services company. What other types of companies or industries could this type of solution be valuable for also?
I think the voice agent, think about what this is doing is really order taking. So any type of interaction where you've got a product catalog and pricing and your customers call in or potentially just want to have a more robust conversation with you over an agent on your website that can actually take action, I think this is applicable, right? So that's a pretty wide swath just in what we've already got that we've talked about today, right? The other thing, though, that I think is interesting about the platform and where Agentic AI is going is, it's adaptable to many different business processes. So we're looking at like a sales coaching agent. Again, it's going to ingest voice. It's going to ingest calls from sales calls. It's going to give feedback on products that they could offer as part of the customer's needs. It's going to analyze what they're doing for their customers today and where they could fill the need of their customers in the future. It's going to help them do research on new people they're meeting in order to see what their priorities might mean or might be. So, there's that compostability, that expandability of the platform, I think is pretty exciting too. So, anything and that's not really just voice, that's text, that's, just regular search, all that coming together in another agentic way.
Yeah. Very cool. As we come to a close, would love your advice for SMB leaders. So, what's a piece of advice for a leader who's skeptical about whether there are opportunities within his or her business to use AI?
Yeah, I think for an SMB leader who's maybe hesitant, I think educating yourself on what's going on a little bit. I mean, obviously, I'm deep in the weeds every day in this space. And it's impossible for someone who's running a business to get that deep into it that's not doing it for their business. But take the time. Take the time to educate yourself. Start using it, even if it's just, asking questions about what your industry is doing or trends or how you could look at a problem a different way. I think once people start interacting with AI in a general sense and thinking about it in their business, the light bulbs will start to go off, and then they'll investigate further. And then I think once they get to that point, having conversations with companies like ours,
Yeah.
right, to just talk about the art of the possible is a really good way to explore what potentially you could do. Right? It doesn't cost you anything to have a conversation with a company and say, hey, what do you do and how would it work in my business? But I think once the light bulb goes off and they see the potential, that's going to be a phase shift for their business. And I don't want to sound like fear mongering or anything else, but I also do firmly believe that if you're burying your head in the sand right now, like if you're just like, it's not applicable, I run a small business, it's just for big enterprise, why would I bother? Or, it's not real, it's all hype, right? I think that's probably the worst decision, right?
Yeah.
Because I do firmly believe that it's going to change, the way people work, the way businesses are built, right? The way that your competition is operating. So if you just choose to ignore it, you truly do run the risk that someone's just going to just bypass you, right? Either a new company that's starting up in your space that's going to embrace it from the ground, or one of your competitors that's taking advantage to educate themselves and reaching out to companies and having conversations and looking for use cases, right? I mean, if you're going to hire one new person, maybe take that investment and do something in the AI space. See if that can return more than what one new person would do in your organization, right? So I think just getting started is the most critical thing.
Yeah, awesome. What a good place to end. Len, I really appreciate you coming by, just curious and sharing more about what you're doing with Helios Core and how you're helping small businesses use this technology to better navigate the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. Really appreciate it. Can't wait to talk to you about more use cases in the future.